Okay, so basically the topic is that it's basically discussing why people believe, and I guess I'll start off by going into my reasoning for asking it and why we should even discuss it. I want to basically get our hypothesis in on it, and then next week when we come back to do our show, it won't be next week, it'll be the week after that, because it's so close to Christmas and New Year's Day, blah, just take a break. But after we get our hypothesis in, and when we start inviting theists in, with all the cards out on the table, we can have a legitimate discussion about such topics, whether it's rational, whether it's pure emotional, but I'm sure we'll get into that. So, if any of you want to start, go ahead. If not, I'll take lead.
I'd like to state my position in a very concise manner.
Go ahead.
I think religion is built on the foundation of not necessarily emotion directly, but when I say spiritual, I mean ideas that are informed by emotions. And so I suppose religions are a kind of spiritual evolution of ideas that have a sociological impact, such that you get mainstream religions form where people share ideas and that kind of builds up. But we meet a lot of theists that don't conform to these typical dogmas. So I find the evolution of their personal spiritual beliefs is based on a mixture of personal experience and emotional input into their ideas. They take a lot more emotion into account than someone who takes a purely rational look at things.
I always look at religion as a sort of parasite. It kind of, or predator, for a better way of explaining it. It preys on their fear of death, the fear of not knowing what is on the other side. And so when you incorporate that sense of, mystery into it, because it's just like what Christopher Hitchens said, some people will like a conspiracy theory instead of no theory at all. And I think that's basically what religion is. It's a big, gigantic conspiracy theory that preys on the unknowns of our lives. And so they turn to that for refuge from this unknown, even though in actual reality they're not getting away from it. They're just being lied to, in my opinion.
Well, I think there's an obvious sense of getting refuge from things while at the same time kind of deluding themselves in a sense. But I personally, I don't see a huge issue with something like that, so long as it doesn't affect how they publicly and socially interact with people. I'm fine with just about anybody believing in whatever the hell they want to believe, so long as they don't vote on those kinds of beliefs. You can go ahead and believe in a soul if you want, but please don't vote to take away abortion because you think that soul's in a zygote. That kind of thing. They can believe whatever they want to have any sort of refuge that they think they're going to have. I'm not going to stop them from doing that. I think that's basic human nature, that people tend to do that.
I have a response to you, Lundy.
Okay.
If religious people aren't supposed to use their religion to inform how they vote, then what should they use to inform how they vote, and how do you apply this in a universal manner?
Well, clearly there's religious people who believe in a secular society. I mean, you have the... can't remember the name of the organization, but there's the secular organization. There's Americans for the Separation of Church and State. That's what it was. It's headed by I think a pastor or a priest, something like that, and they acknowledge that politics and religion should not be mixed because you can be religious and still maintain secular values, and I think that's probably the best thing to do.
But when people believe that the politics should reflect what they believe is moral, isn't that their right under the idea of a democratic society? Or do you believe that idea of a democratic society is incomplete?
I'm fine. I want to be clear here. I'm fine with people who want to vote who want to vote based on whatever ideology they have. I will engage only with those who vote on an ideology that I think is flawed. So that's when I start to care. I'm not saying that I don't think people should be allowed to vote because they vote with their religion. I'm saying that those are the people that I would like to engage with, not just anybody who believes in whatever.
So in other words, you actively promote the ideals of a secular society?
Pretty much.
Now, I want to throw a question there. As this may be going away from the reason that people believe, but I want to kind of ask this: do you think it is at all possible that they could separate the two, that they could have both a rational side to them and a religious side to them, and they can actually differentiate the two depending on what situation they happen to find themselves in? For example,
Absolutely.
like if they're voting, or if they're between voting and going to church. Church would obviously be the spiritual side of them, and voting would be the rational side of them. Do you think it is at all possible they could differentiate two and have a clear, distinct boundary?
Absolutely. I mean, not just in voting. I can cite only anecdotal evidence for as far as voting is concerned. Nobody comes to mind as far as a public figure that does that. But I mean, my mom, my dad, they're both Christians, and neither one of them vote in accordance to their religion, because they don't see that their religion has any place in the democratic process. And that's fine. And I don't think that as soon as somebody believes in one thing that's irrational, then everything that they do is then irrational. Clearly, they can maintain many rational beliefs while maintaining one irrational one. I think it's probably true that most of us are irrational about something. We're just not aware what that thing is yet.
It's just that when you're appealing to emotion for the foundation of your beliefs. I find it almost impossible for it to, because then it's not really emotionally tied to you if you can just switch it off like a light switch. So could there be something else driving them?
Well, the religion itself, when we speak of the religion being there, in essence, it's something that people believe for reasons that are outside of their morality, or outside of simply what they believe is just the fact of the matter, like we accept science does. When they believe for the sake of, not wanting death to be the end, for instance, it's not going to stop them from looking at other instances outside of the context of religion as being outside of the context of religion. Though, like, I've spoken to you before about a friend of mine who believes in a God and in reincarnation, specifically because he's afraid of death, but he does not vote in any way that I can see as religious, and he tells me how he votes, and he sends me his ballots to say, what do you think here, what's your opinion here, and he wants to have discussions about these things. So clearly there's nothing stopping them from being rational despite their religious leanings.
Is now him being afraid of death, and him saying he believes in reincarnation, I think you said, is there anything whatsoever that could convince him that is simply wrong, regardless of what his emotions are?
As far as the God thing goes?
Yeah, it's kind of like, when we asked Nephilim Free this question, is there any evidence, anything whatsoever, that can break that emotional tie you have with this God of yours? And he basically said nothing. So is your friend so deep in it, is he so afraid of death that he's willing to just ignore everything? So in a sense it is affecting the way he thinks? Or do you think there's something else that I'm missing?
Well, the way in which he usually defines the God that he believes in, it's usually completely outside the purview of scientific investigation. It's an outside causal agent to the universe's existence, mainly. That's all it is.
Oh, like spaceless, timeless, immaterial, unembodied mind kind of thing?
Pretty much.
I see. It's outside of scrutiny. Now, with him admitting that like I said, he's pretty much just scared of dying. what about the explanations that we give? We weren't alive for the first billion or so years of this planet's existence, and we didn't mind it one bit. If you explain to him that way, would he still be scared of death?
So, with his particular background, with his particular culture, I don't think that there will be a way to rationally convince him that his fears are unnecessary. Mainly because he's an unhealthy person to begin with, so he's well aware that he's usually a lot closer to death than most other people because he's very overweight. He has a very weak immune system. And then there's the people that he loves and cares about also being close to death. His parents had him when they were really old, so his dad is like 90-something years old. He's close to death, and pretty much his life is surrounded by the fear of death. So it's just not something that I think you'll be able to rationally evaluate.
All right, yeah, I can see that happening. I see how the emotional aspect could actually, lock somebody in that mode of thinking. I mean, there's plenty of people I can name right now, but of all the people that are thinking in this way, do they at least acknowledge that this is not a right way to rationalize the world that they live in? Whether or not there is a God in it or not.
I don't think, as far as my friend goes, I don't think he even looks at the world through the lens of a God existing. I think that's just kind of a background compartmentalized belief that he has that doesn't really affect anything else.
So it's a safety net.
Pretty much. That's the maximum reason that he even believes in the first place. It's just a compartmentalized belief that he holds so that he doesn't get afraid or really pissed off about death.
I
because
see.
He thinks, hey, at least they'll be coming back at some point. I'm not going to be able to see them. I'm not going to know who they are, but I can at least be rest assured that they will be back.
I see.
It's not the end.
I see. All right. Well, we touched on the emotional aspect of it, but I want to kind of get into another thing, which would be the logical aspect of believing. I'm sure I don't have to explain to you guys who John Lennox is or William Lane Craig is. Now, going through the whole logical argument for God, do they really hold any water whatsoever? As far as thinking, when I was talking to FrogE one time, something being logically valid but not logically sound. It's both still logical. For example, if your premises are false, your conclusion will still follow. Strife isn't all elephants are pink. Strife is an elephant, therefore Strife is pink. That kind of thing. Do you think there is any real legitimate logic going on when it comes to legitimately trying to find God?
I've never seen an argument put forth by any of the likes of John Lennox or William Lane Craig or even Alvin Plantinga that is completely and totally valid. There's usually a fallacy somewhere. If you look hard enough, you can find it. You can go with Kalam, everything that begins to exist as a cause, but the problem is within the wording of the premise itself. It's sort of it equivocates his belief of what something beginning to exist is with what actually is meant by something beginning to exist, and that doesn't usually match up, and you have a structural invalidity there. Ontological arguments, no matter which one you go with, you have an invalidity when it comes to just when the premises are allowed to take place, such as defining something prior to any sort of observance of what it is.
Do you think they are? How about this? Does anyone here think that they know deep down inside that what they're saying is actually fallacy based?
I think they might be aware that what they say is flawed to some level. Not that they know what the flaw is, but that they know they're not perfect, and that what they say is not going to be flawless as far as logic is concerned. But I mean, you look at Craig, and he says something along those lines when he says, I'm aware that a lot of people aren't going to be convinced by my arguments and that there's going to be refutations to these arguments, but the reason is not because my ultimate premise that God exists is wrong. The reason is because I'm just not good enough to make that argument yet.
Huh. So even though that's interesting because they admit that these arguments won't hold any water or so much of it. They are actually, admitting that, hey, these arguments, they won't hold any water, but I'm going to tell them anyway because I want to, in a sense. That would just go right back, not towards logic, but that would go back towards emotion, wouldn't it?
As far as the academics are concerned, I think the reason that they put forth the arguments in the first place is so that they can get rebutted and so that they can make better arguments after they account for the rebutting. I think that's why they do it.
I see. So they don't want to get put in that position. Well, I never said that kind of thing, right? Or is it like another safety net that they have to put in place to kind of keep themselves up in the air?
No, I think it has to do with their ultimate goal. Their ultimate goal is to convince people that God exists, so they want to do everything they can to make a convincing argument, and if that means making arguments that aren't so convincing now so that they can refine them later on, then that's what they do. It's not. I don't think there's any sort of like ultimate deceptive strategy to it.
Wouldn't that, them holding on to arguments that don't necessarily meet the burden per se, wouldn't their sole reasoning for holding on to those arguments, wouldn't that be just pure emotional then?
Yeah, I just want to say that, when they present an argument, they've thought about it and let's say this is the first time they present it, it's not necessarily that they're aware what exactly is wrong with it. So as far as they're concerned, at the moment this argument is sound, then when you get their critique, they read the critique and then they refine their argument if they agree with the critique. And then when they present the refined argument again, they think that this is maybe a finished version. And, so it goes on. And the ultimate goal is to get a very refined argument, or maybe an argument that is infallible.
Huh. I see a little bit of an issue there, because it's kind of like, we'll just go along with it and see where it leads. They're just making stuff up as they go. That's kind of like what they sound to me. Once they find the flaws, they fix those flaws with more flaws, and in the end, you go into an infinite regress of flaws, but you never really catch up because they're always one step ahead of you.
Yeah. But if you think about it, it's almost, and I'm using this very, very loosely, it's almost like the scientific method. Let's say that you have somebody that is, of course, I got to train now. If you think someone who's figured out, what gravity is, they do their research, they run their numbers, they think they have something that actually works, they post it, it goes through peer review, and during peer review, it's ferreted out that no, it's incorrect. So then they go back, either start over from scratch or build on what they've already learned. I think that's what BigLundi is saying they're doing. Now, I mean, they've got a lot more, I guess, leeway, or they tend to play a little more with the facts, but I think the same methodology very loosely could be kind of construed as that.
Yeah, I agree. They both use the same sort of steps to come up to the conclusion. For example, if something doesn't fit, you go back and you see if there's anything that you could have missed, you could have modified, that would essentially, follow the same argument but would lead to the conclusion, when you're doing your gravity thing. Yeah, but when you say that they play with the facts more, doesn't that kind of go against the scientific method?
Exactly. The problem is where their starting point is. As a scientist, we're going to start basically saying we don't know what we're going to let the information lead us to what truth is. Whereas their methodology, they know what truth is, and they're going to go seek out and find what facts, air quotes, support that understanding. So it's not science. That's why I said when I use that word, it's very, very loose in that context, because in no way, shape, or form does it reflect how the scientific method actually is used in peer review or anything else.
I see that as kind of cherry picking. Don't you think?
Well, absolutely. But again, you've got to look at it from what they're trying to accomplish and what they feel validates their methodology. They look at it as they're saving souls. We think of, the analogy that I use quite a bit is if you came up to an animal that was suffering, and you could do something to help that suffering. Short of being a sociopath, you're probably going to try to help the animal. Now, if you're going to give aid to something that's just suffering a little bit and maybe not even a sentient being, if you put yourself in their shoes and they think that we are going to be burning in hell forever, being tortured continuously, they feel that gives them the right to take some liberties with truth. I don't agree with it. I think it's absolute horseshit, and I think the truth should take precedence over anything and everything, regardless how uncomfortable it is. But they don't see it that way because, again,
that's what I see here. I see it playing on emotion more than anything. It's emotion that's modifying the creationist scientific method. It's emotion that is forming their conclusions before they even done any study on the evidence that supposedly led up to that conclusion. I see it just as pure emotion. I guess the main question would be, is there anything other than emotion that's driving these people to believe in a God?
That would be...
it's a tough one, isn't it?
Well, I mean, if you want to start drilling down, why do we do anything? And I go with the old adage that most everyone does each action for one of two reasons when you get down to the core of it, either to receive pleasure or to avoid pain. Now, the understanding of how you get that pleasure or avoid that pain can be scientific, but in most cases is going to be based on an assumption and going to be based on potentially
what some people find as pleasure, if you're talking to a scientist, doesn't have to be purely sexual or anything like that. It can be something like, like they landed the rover on Mars, Curiosity on Mars. That was a fulfilling moment for the people at NASA. That was really fulfilling for them, and they found joy and pleasure in the fact that they've accomplished something scientifically that few other people have done, so that could be pleasurable to them. But their pleasure is based on absolute facts. They've done study, they've done their homework, they've invested the time, energy, and resources to make this happen, and they did. And they did that for the sole purpose of not just, being pleasure, but fulfilling their own curiosity, which is another form of pleasure. I don't see religion as actually being needed as form of pleasure. And no, I see that as kind of selfish if they're thinking in that way.
But one thing you may be kind of looking over at this point is, for, I would say, the vast majority, they do believe what they're using to base their beliefs off of is factual evidence. Now, is that because they've been too lazy to actually go out and ferret out what science does say about those facts, if you want to call them that? In my opinion, yes. And I think the reason is that's an avoidance technique, so they don't have to go through the pain of confronting the fact that they've been wrong and that those long-held security blanket beliefs, if you will start to erode. And I think, at least on a subconscious level, a lot of people understand that. Therefore, they're going to take the facts at face value, cite them as such, believe them, and just, if anybody says, you haven't checked this, they can always go back to going, you've checked evolution. Well, yeah, I've looked at a bunch of, a lot of the peer review I've gone through. I understand how gene theory works. I understand how, I've done a lot. But at the end of the day, you're still deferring your facts to someone else's work unless you're a biologist. And I'm assuming none of us here are. So we still have to rely on what we read, what we believe in the peer-reviewed journals. Because you have to admit, it all could be made up. It all could be bullshit, and we would have no way of knowing it unless we were in the laboratory testing it ourselves. So there's a modicum of faith on our part as well. And I think a lot of them base the same thing off of that. Their beliefs, well, you believe in this book, you believe in this science book, I believe in the Bible. It's just a different, it's just a different grouping of words. So why is your belief any more valid than mine?
Well, if you were to look at the stuff that we hold to, for example, the stuff in the science books and stuff like that, there's one thing in the science books that are not found in Bibles, and that is actually instructions, well, at least in my science books, instructions on how you can actually do this stuff yourself and find out. And now, I've done both things. You can look at the, let's say, water, for example. Okay, water droplets have skin. Here's how you find out. Put a drop of water on a microscope and look at it. Okay, so that confirms that water droplets will hold themselves together in a perfect sphere, and they've even done it in space because they have pictures proving that. Kind of like the old saying, pictures or it didn't happen. The thing is that we don't have that direct feed towards God, because if they say all you have to do is sit down and pray with all of your heart, all of your soul, all of your mind and such, and so far all I'm hearing is empty space, quiet, nothing. There's nothing there. There's nothing telling me that you exist. There's nothing telling me that there's actually a heaven. There's nothing telling me that there's actually a hell. Devil's not playing with my mind at all.
Exactly. And
yeah.
That's the difference between a skeptic and a believer. The skeptic has questions and wants to have at least some sort of validity, if you will, to what they believe. They want to do at least one or two levels of cross-checking to see if it still holds true, either on a logical basis or even at a scientific level. They can find things to back it up. Where I think a theist, at least from what I've seen, they stop at square one. If it's printed in this specific book, it doesn't need to be tested. They've got an I believe button and they can push it and walk away. And I think where we as atheists run into a problem is it's very hard for me to understand that train of thought, because I know how my brain works and I question everything. Whereas they say, well, you just got to have faith. To me, it's lazy, it's dishonest, it is cowardly to a certain degree, because you're not willing to face reality.
You think they're scared of the truth?
Absolutely. I think there are people out there that are absolutely terrified of the truth.
I want to be clear. I don't think that's indicative of all people who believe though.
But
clearly there are intelligent theists out there that think, well, I think I got it right. I really do. And that's just the end of it. No sort of deception necessary. It's just from their perspective, they think they've got it right. We don't think that they do. They're usually willing to engage, and if they're not, it usually does have something to do with the faith aspect. Like, I've had a personal experience and I cannot demonstrate to you, so there's really nothing we can do here. No argument to be had.
Right.
There was one story on the radio in my local town where I guess a neurosurgeon had a near-death experience, and apparently, this guy being a neurosurgeon, he knows how the brain works. He knows what's going on, and he had a personal experience, and now he's apparently a believer. And it has been shown time and time again that if the brain is in a state of disrepair, crazy crap will happen to you, in that realm of disrepair. You'll think you're flying even though you're actually not flying. You're anchored to a hospital bed fighting for your life. But it's just very compelling how much how much you actually. I think what that neurosurgeon's based it on is pure emotion. He wants it to be true. And so he's going to ignore what he's been taught or what he knows.
I'm not sure if that's based on emotion for him. I think that's more based on greed. There was, I think this is the same one that True Puka did a little bit of a documentary on. Why would a scientist lie, or something along those lines?
Oh.
And he went over the fact that this guy, this neurosurgeon, is getting book deals, he's getting speaking deals, he's getting a lot of national attention for this, and he's getting a lot of money out of it too. And as Matt Dillahunty has said before, if I want to make a lot of money, all I got to do is deconvert.
Absolutely.
So there's greed involved in that one. So you don't think he truly believes the shit he's peddling?
Well, tell me,
I'm
do you think that...
I'm not sure if he does. I'm not a mind reader. I'm just saying that there's a lot of money involved in what he's been doing, and to me, that seems like a pretty good motivational factor.
Yeah, do you think that Peter Popoff really believes the stuff he says?
No.
Clearly not, because he engages in the bullshittery.
Exactly.
Huh. I see more. There's another thing of greed. I want all this money because all I have to do is deconvert. That's a pretty good money making deal. I mean, just how much money would Christopher Hitchens made if he just deconverted right there on the spot?
He didn't really need the money. He's already making a decent amount of money as it was.
Actually, with Christopher Hitchens, he wouldn't have made money because everyone who gives him money now wouldn't want to give him money more if he became a crazy idiot.
True,
but I don't think he'd be able to gain much following among the crazy idiots.
I think he would be able to, because look at what happened with Anthony Flew. He became a deist, and pretty much every single crazy person out there said, "I believe in God now." And they pretended that he believed in like the Christian Protestant version of God with the heaven and hell bullshit, because he was convinced by a teleological argument that there might be a deistic God out there in his later years.
Before we change the topic, I just want to quickly say that whilst we're talking about people making money from religion, I recommend the documentary Marjoe, spelt Marjoe, and it's a story of a child preacher who was brought up to basically be a preacher, converted to atheism in his later teenage years, and then came back to preaching purely for the money. And his documentary is essentially him coming out and, admitting this, whilst at the same time exposing how other people do this. With the, going around and, the whole speaking in tongues and giving people these pseudo-religious experiences and then taking money.
Yeah, that's what I was about to say. It kind of reminds me of the Jesus Camp documentary. That was disturbing.
Hey, Chadwick, quick question. Why do you think people believe? I think it's pure emotion, but do you think that there's a different reason other than emotion why someone would believe in a God?
It's a combination of emotion and the how we've evolved to personify things that or anthropomorphize things that don't really have that anthropomorphize random events.
I see.
It's an instinct. I mean, if we hear a sudden noise behind us in a dark alley, we evolve to automatically assume it's a knife-wielding maniac until proven otherwise, and as a defense mechanism.
I see. So it's better to be safe than sorry kind of thing. So it's Pascal's wager.
I guess so, yeah. But yeah, I was telling sirstrife and others the other night about my former roommate, how she's become much more religious. And even when she wasn't that religious, you couldn't really talk about religion, because if I tried to say why I find if I'm not trying to be rude, but she about it, she would still say I was being an asshole about it, describing why I don't agree with religion, why I'm an atheist. She would find it's offensive.
I think I see like two things going on that could drive a person to actually believe in a God. I think it's a total lack or understanding of the actual facts that scientifically that govern our world. and there's also pure emotion, but the pure emotion is hindering them from actually understanding those facts, i.e. that's what Nephilim Free does.
Right. I mean, they say like, how would you think that one of them told me that if I really think that a wolf evolved into this little chihuahua, then I really have some serious issues. But if they really understood evolution, they wouldn't say something like that.
Yeah, and they wouldn't say anything about a crocodile neither.
Oh yeah, I remember when I first saw I actually watched the Kent Hovind videos by myself for the first time, and I didn't know that I know a lot more about evolution thanks to Aaron Raw and Thunderfoot and Potholer 54 than I did back then. But as I'm watching this, I'm thinking, gosh, that can't possibly be as stupid as I think it is. No one can really be that stupid.
And you get surprised.
Yeah, I mean.
But now that we have Prag on, I kind of want to ask him, do you think that there's any reason other than, a lack of understanding or emotion that could drive a person to believe in God?
Lack of understanding, or what's the other one?
Pure emotion.
Or
Or you think those are like the main two that would drive a person to actually believe?
well, they're so broad. It's just, I guess we're trying to find out what all the broad topics are, maybe. Because
no, basically what we've done is we've gone to a discussion on why somebody would believe, and we were just getting on to the fact that there are some people that just don't understand the actual facts out there. Like when some people say, Are you kidding me? There's no way that you could have a half crocodile, half a duck, and it evolve into a crocodile and then a duck. That's not what evolution says. Or, oh, so you think that the creatures weren't complete yet, and now they are. No, every creature in the evolutionary process is a complete creature. It's just adapting to its changing surroundings. My favorite one is, if we evolved from monkeys, why are there still monkeys?
Wait. I got one better. A creationist said, scientists say we evolved from monkeys over millions of years. But monkeys don't live for millions of years.
Ah.
What about the one that's better? That is, if we evolved from monkeys, why are there still monkeys?
Yeah, that's what I just said, dumbass.
Yeah.
yeah, besides the logic, well, I'm not logic, knowledge and emotion. You can also say logic in the sense of, or more pragmatic, since my name, way. If a business you might have an opportunity for requires you to be of a certain religion, you might take it.
Oh, yeah, I can understand that.
Yeah, not as broad, probably less likely to find a person like that. But hey, it's a category we can add to the list.
Category, but that would be, for personal or financial gain. That's kind of another thing that we were talking about. Some people will just say that they believe to make a shitload of money on it. I mean, I could just imagine how much a Killing Christopher Hitchens could make if he ever came out as, oh, I believe in God now. Can you imagine? Because think about it. He already had a fan base from the amount of people he sold his God-bashing book on. Then he could come back and say, oh, you know what, never mind, I actually believe in God, and make another book and sell that to all the believers, so he just sold his book to both parties.
Yeah, exactly. He's making money on both ends of the spectrum.
You're doubling your money.
And that's kind of what the weapons industry does by selling its weapons to 2 different countries and then getting them to go to war.
Yep, exactly. I mean, it's almost to the point where, there's really no sound reason. I think I can safely conclude that there is no sound reason why someone would actually believe in a God. And, because it really boils down to pure emotion, lack of understanding, or they're just trying to make a shitload of money.
Yeah, I mean, that's
or some other personal game. Yeah.
That's what I've been told repeatedly. They say you have to have a experience, or you feel Jesus talking to you in your heart. I mean, it's all complete bullshit. It's all stuff that you're making. That it's your own imaginary friend. It's something in your own mind.
Yeah, and the thing is, the thing that I don't get is, if they admit that, oh, it was a personal experience, you didn't experience it, only I did, but somehow my own personal experience gives me the right to tell you that you are damned to an eternity in hell if you don't think the way I do.
and the entire concept is flawed of converting someone like that is flawed. Is fundamentally flawed because you have to already accept it before you're giving proof that it exists, and this proof is supposed to be something that's completely subjective.
I see it. Yeah, I see that. If you can't reason with them because let's face it, there is no reason behind it. You have to then go towards a threat.
Yeah, that's what I mean. I mean, how scary is that to hear as a child? If you use your head, if you believe something, that if you think about what's been told to you critically, then you could be severely punished for that. For the worst punishment imaginable for using your intellect.
Wait, are we being unfair, though? I mean, there are reasons to believe. I mean, it's not like people...
It's not good ones.
Well, okay, but there are still reasons.
Yeah, well, we know that there's reasons. That's exactly what we're discussing. I mean, fear is a perfectly legitimate reason to believe. Like, if I believe that at the bottom of this pit there's not a bunch of cotton balls that are going to cushion my fall, but a big bed of spikes, I'm going to be scared to jump down. That's that's why when some people like Lundy, he says, I don't want to state your life or anything. I don't know if you care, but he said he's scared of heights. He fully admits that is a irrational fear if there's no reason, like if you're supported by a structure or something like that. But that's still a fear, and so he will tend to avoid places where he would be in a state of panic because of heights.
Yeah, but that's by no means the only reason. I know when I was a believer, a large part of it was purely intellectual. That, granted, like JR said, maybe it's not a good reason, but God was the only reason that my mind could really understand for things like morality or the origin of what have you, as an explanation to things that I did not understand. It was
Well, that's what we were talking about before you came on. That you can also use logic and scientific references to supposedly strengthen your belief in God. But what it really comes down to is your lack of understanding of such.
It's funny that they'll say the exact same thing back to us. Like it's because we don't understand God, or like they use lines like you must have a lot of faith to be an atheist, or you must have a lot of faith to be an evolutionist.
Yeah, I just don't see it being based on faith. I kind of want to get Henry's or FrogE's opinion on this one. I mean, because I just don't see it being faith based at all. Henry, quick question. Do you see evolution, our scientific understanding of the world, as faith-based in any way, shape, or form whatsoever?
Yes.
How is it faith-based?
I'll second that.
But when I say faith-based, I don't mean the same kind of faith we apply to religious faith. But I would say it's faith-based because, referring back to our solipsist discussion, we have faith that evolution actually occurred. We have faith that when we look at the fossil record, those fossils are the result of dinosaurs and not, say, Descartes' demon implanting false memories into our head. And I know this comes across as an extreme form of skepticism, but
I don't think that's the word. That's faith, but a different definition of the word. Religious faith is the belief in something without any evidence for it, or in fact strong evidence for the contrary. The way you're using faith, it's more of just trust and belief that our senses aren't lying to us. Like there's some sort of unprovable or undisprovable force that's making the whole world appear differently than it actually is.
I think you're being unfair there, though. I would say that the religious people actually do. That's what they mean by faith. It's a certain type of trust that has been earned, quote unquote, through various personal experiences, or kind of serendipitous moments, or odd moments of extreme coincidence or something, where they take that to be a reason for their belief or
Witt
justification.
Witt definitely has a point. I don't think there's very many, if any, theists out there that would not give you a reason for their belief. Nietzsche said that faith is not wanting to know the truth. But see, I don't believe that. I don't go with that, because I think these people believe because they think there is some type of evidence out there.
Well, that reminds me of something Jaguar Jones once said: argument by incomplete devastation. A plane crash occurred, and everyone died except one child survived with only third-degree burns. Therefore, God exists.
Yeah, I'm not saying their reasoning is valid by any means. I'm not saying any of their evidence, air quotes again, is even real. But what I'm saying is it's not a complete, unsubstantiated, just I want God to exist, I want him to be this way, therefore he is, and I can push the I believe button and bring him into my existence.
I disagree. All those that explanation, that example I just gave, I think that's just an expansion. That's a justification for they're purely emotional reasonings for believing in God. They want there to be more than just an emotional reason for believing in God, but there really isn't. So they make up these. They draw connections between random events to their belief and use that as proof, as really bad proof.
Correct. So their reasoning's flawed, but in their reality, it's still proof.
Well,
you see what I'm saying?
In terms of faith, too, it's not faith despite the evidence. Their evidence, negation. We call it shoddy evidence, but it's not faith, despite the evidence or with absolutely no evidence. It's these kind of very, questionable justifications. It is a type of trust, and they often will use the analogy that you use, like say they'll use the analogy of faith in a spouse or something, So it's not. It's a type of trust, really.
But they use it. I really think it's a different faith. Faith is, as far as the only way I would use faith is if I would have trust in certain people that I'm close to do certain things, or trust in certain processes that I know work, or techniques, but.
But again, I've got to fall back to, I think that it stems from the starting point. If we're looking for truth, we go out and allow reality to inform us. We get the data. Based on the data, we draw a conclusion.
Right, they start with their conclusions.
Exactly. That's the entire problem.
Well, hold on, though.
Why
they have an observational bias, a filter that allows them to find ways of proving their own emotionally based ideas. Sometimes if I would annoy my mother by doing something as a child, and I would trip and fall or bang my head on something, I would have she would say, "See right there, that's God punishing you for doing that." But I do that all the time, anyways, and she would never say that God's punishing me for brushing my teeth. And it turns out I actually have a fine motor coordination disorder and a balancing disorder, and that's why I always fall down. So the likelihood that I'm going to injure myself shortly after doing something that raises her blood pressure is pretty high.
Right. It's all confirmation bias on their end.
Exactly.
And we've got to worry about that same thing on our end if we get too vested into what we're looking for. But again, at least the starting point is what I think everything stems from. When you're looking for truth in whatever area you're looking for, it is all contingent on, do you go into it thinking that you know what's right, or do you go into it being honest enough and open enough to say, I don't know anything, let me see what's going on from here. That's hard to do.
Another way to say that, though, is that people look at the world through a certain paradigm, through a certain lens. And I think, for me, again, when I was younger, that's the only lens that I could see the world through. Nothing else made sense to me. And so...
Bible glasses.
With more education and more understanding of the nuances of reality and, my position changed. But before all that, before I, God is it's a type of lens that if you kind of grow up in, it's hard to even think about things outside of that paradigm. And it's like Negation was saying, a starting point, a kind of structure by which you view the world or think in general, the way you think. And so
Lundy had a really good point of saying that it's kind of like the I don't know if you're familiar with the logical axioms and mathematical axioms that are out there, but that's kind of our starting point. And if you want to say that that's where our faith begins, I think there could be an argument made there. Lundy, if you want to jump in.
I disagree, because those are.
I mean, they're testable. I understand that.
Yeah, those are objectively confirmable. Is confirmable a word?
Well, let me use the example, JR, of the idea of an external world. Is that something that is taken on faith in the same way? Say the problem of other minds, right? The assumption, it's a pure assumption that there's something beyond what I experience, and that what I experience corresponds to some kind of external mind that person has, just like me. I mean, isn't that equally something that is unfalsifiable? It cannot be objectively verified in any way. It's kind of just a axiom, if you will, that we assume.
I think there are some suppositions like that are so beyond testability, and even if you could confirm that is true, which it's impossible to do so, there's absolutely nothing we could do about it. There's such a it's so negligible that it could be true that it's just completely it's a waste of time to even bother considering it.
So it's a waste of time to consider the possibility that something beyond your own experiences exist. I mean, if it applies to God, why doesn't it apply to the external world? Which
that's the thing. Like there's people who like to make the argument like that there could be a God who guided all these processes to occur, and therefore creationism is.
What I'm talking about is like pure solipsism. In order to step outside of that, you're making the same type of faith-based assumption that you do with any other imperceptible deity, right?
Well, I just never bothered to go down the philosophical question of, is what we see really reality, or is there some sort of, or is this somehow artificially made? Does everyone else really perceive the world in a roughly similar way that I do, or is this all someone's dream, or random bizarre questions like that? Because there's absolutely nothing to accomplish by asking those questions. There's no way you can prove it. There's no way you can answer it. There's nothing to be gained from it, and I just think it's a complete waste of time in doing so.
Yeah, it destroys your rebuttal. Interesting. It's taking something that you hold to be true and then saying that's exactly the same justification they're using. So if you're going to criticize them, then you ought to criticize yourself. That's all it's doing.
I don't really see the relation.
Well, think about it like this. The assumption that other minds exist is just as outside experience as is this immaterial God that people assume. It's just God is, in this case, just nothing more than another mind.
Not really. I can interact with other people. I can see their EKGs.
Yeah, but the idea that those people, quote unquote, that you're interacting with, whether or not they have an actual mind behind those objects of reality, whether or not they are essentially like a consciousness like you are, in other words. And so God, in a sense, is just another mind. He's just another one of those unfalsifiable types of minds.
That's not true. There's
one over the other is unjustified. I mean, why assume one but not the other?
Well, the reason one actually exists and one I actually can see.
Well, the thing I was going to say is, regardless of whether or not it's giving you exists, at least the person right in front of you, or the people I'm talking to right now, is giving a better show than the God. Yeah,
So
there's a distinction there.
Yeah, there is a big distinction there. And
There
if you look at it, God has not put on any show. I'm sorry, people are leaving the theater in masses, and they're coming to mine because mine's more interesting. That's just the way. That's just the way it is.
Yeah, but in terms of a entity behind this show, so to speak, there's no more reason to assume that. You don't experience that. When JR says, I experience other people, he's not experiencing their consciousness.
I'm not mind melding with them, if that's what you mean.
Yes, exactly. So, in that sense.
Yeah.
And some people might actually say that they experience God in some kind of empirical way.
And I want to kind of organize it a bit. I want to let Prag go, and then I want Lundy to speak.
Okay, cool. I was going to take a jab at a few things. First, a few steps back, with God and, is it a practical axiom or what is it? I kind of think of it as practical, and let's not just focus on like the Christian God. There's other gods. If you're, a caveman and you're looking up and you're seeing the world around you and the forces around you, and they react to you. They do things you don't fully understand. And you start to notice some similarities between it and you, almost as if the world around you has a mind of its own. You might think of it as a force beyond you. So you might assume some kind of God or something of that sort is controlling these things, or maybe they are in themselves all part of one God. It's an assumption, but it does have some rational thought involved in it. It can be based on ignorance, but everything we do, everything we know is based on ignorance, in the fact that we don't know the unknown. That's kind of obvious, but it's still relevant. As long as you don't think in absolutes, you at least got one thing right, that you don't know absolute. Now, with the thing on assumptions that we do, for example, we mentioned the brain, and EKGs and stuff like that. We know, our thoughts and stuff like that. There's an assumption there. There's an assumption that the EKGs and the corresponding responses it gives us when a person does a certain thought or says a certain thing, etc. We're assuming it's the source. It could be a response from it. In other words, my thinking could cause things in my brain to occur. In other words, that's not the source of my thinking, though. It may not make sense, but that's because your assumptions differ from the assumption I'm presenting. I don't agree with this assumption I'm presenting, but it still is a valid assumption. They both state the same thing. They're both stating that, and they can both be used. One's just saying one's the after effect, and you can still reverse engineer things. You can take the after effects and use that to make predictions. But still, they're both assumptions. You can't prove these things because they're beyond our ability, at least at the moment. Let's see, other assumptions we make. The assumption that there is no God, honestly, is an assumption. I
disagree. We don't make an assumption that there is no God. We just don't agree with the assumption that there is.
Well, that's some people, not all. For example, if you were born in faith and you left faith, you are making an assumption there is no God. So you got to keep that in mind.
That all that means is that my life is predate the assumption that there is a God predates my life.
Mm-hmm. Let me go ahead and interrupt real quick and let BigLundi go in, because BigLundi, your mic is working, so you can go ahead and speak.
Fantastic. Oh shit! Of course, my printer's gotta go off. Goddamn. All right. So we got into solipsism a bit. There's a lot that I wanted to address here. It was being spoken that we can presume that solipsism is incorrect because we can go around, we can look at other people, we can examine other people, we can verify that kind of stuff. But it really doesn't address when you actually know what solipsism is. It really doesn't address the problems that solipsism presents, because all of that can be taken back into circularity. as far as solipsism goes, because sorry, when you meet somebody else, you are meeting somebody that your brain could have just come up with or made on its own, or your mind, sorry. You are meeting something that you could have totally just made completely on your own, and you have no way of verifying whether or not that is a figment of your complete imagination or not. And you can say, but I can touch them and I can feel them. Well, your senses are also a part of your mind, so how can you differentiate? It's a never-ending problem. As soon as you start to get into the idea of any sort of verification, solipsism kicks your ass. That's what it is. The reason that I usually have for distinguishing away from solipsism is it has more to do with whether or not it's useful in any way. You look at some problems and you go, okay, well, let's say solipsism is true. How would it affect this? And if solipsism wasn't true, how would that affect this particular example? So regardless of whether or not solipsism is true, you can't prove that it's not true, because that's just a problem that hasn't ever been able to be fixed. But you can come up with good reasons to not be a solipsist. And those reasons are reasons that I have not seen come from the side of a theological, theistic perspective, at least not as substantive.
All right, then, and now Negation of P can go.
Thanks, man. Yeah, as far as solipsism and, well, yeah, Lundy, I absolutely agree that, with pretty much everything you said, and Witt, kind of along the same lines, but I think the main thing we have to get to, I understand that if we're going to drill down to the point of being a pure solipsist, we can't know anything. We can't know that there is anything outside of our own experience whatsoever. That's it. The difference that I see is that let's restrict our experiment here to God. When I test God, the input that my brain is giving me, my experience, is the same as if God didn't exist. Whereas every other human being around, every other tangible thing that I can see, and again, I understand all of this could be a construction on a matrix, if you will. But based on that, all of the other stimuli other than God would have to be a construct outside of me. Someone would have to be making this up, or my own mind would have to be making this up, whereas if we're talking about God, since there is no input, and I guess I'm looking at it from a pure input-reaction type stance. I get an input, let's say my daughter walks in here and touches me on the shoulder. I get that feeling, regardless if I saw her or heard her walk into the room, I get that input through my senses and I react to it. God, on the other hand, does not interact with me physically, mentally, logically. Any type of input that I get from God is non-existent. So to me, if you're gonna go down to the solipsist road, I understand that it all could be brain in a jar type thing. But if we're going to have faith in anything, if we're going to believe anything outside of ourselves is real, then we should base everything we get on the inputs that we are receiving. Again, I understand all of those could be flawed as well. You start putting in drugs or mental conditions and all of that. But at least you could see where the rationale comes behind that, is that I have got a stimuli, I respond to the stimuli, and as far as I understand it, the stimuli is independent of me. Whereas God, there's nothing stimulating us there. I mean, I think I rambled a little bit. I may have got a little convoluted there. Does that make any sense at all?
It makes perfect sense. And actually, since the convo has exceeded the hour, I kind of want to conclude. But I kind of want to go through each of your guys' final conclusions on the reasoning why people might believe if emotion or whatnot. We'll start with FrogE and then work our way down. If FrogE wants to go first, if not, then someone else can go first.
I think there is emotional utility to religion, and if people deny it, then that's from their own perspective. And I think that's it's not useful to the conversation, because if you want to understand someone's perspective, you need to gain common language with them. And I think without that common language, we're just essentially judging someone relative to ourselves. And I don't think that's useful myself. So I think, to really tackle why people believe is to talk to them and study it from an almost psychological perspective.
Yeah, that's something that we're going to be doing on the next one, which is what you said was a brilliant idea. Lundy, got any final thoughts before we continue?
Well, we've been having a little bit of an argument, as you guys have been speaking in the chat here, as far as whether or not religion's emotional usefulness is something of any sort of real substance. And I made the appeal that it was an emotional usefulness, not a physical one, and then Wittgensteinism said, well, technically, if it is an emotional usefulness, then you can say that it's also a physical one because emotions are physical. But for me, I don't define physical in that manner. I define physical more in the ontological sense of what you could refer to as a substance, which would be the most fundamental thing of all things, and what the substance is never ends up being emotion. Emotion comes far, far, far after the substance, when it gets into a very particular amalgamation and it interacts with each other, and substances interact with each other in a very specific way. So I don't consider that to be physical, but I do consider it to be a product of the physical. I think that's an important distinction to make.
All right. Negation?
I guess the only thing I'd like to say on that is if you do believe that it is an emotional response, which I tend to side with that camp. The thing I really want to stress there is that as humans, we do not make good decisions when we're making decisions in any emotional state. The best decisions, the best rationale comes from calm, reasoned, rational thought. Anytime we put emotion into any decision, it becomes flawed.
Oh, come on. What about the decision? What about, like, moral decisions? What about the decision to love your wife, insofar as that is a decision, I guess? I mean, of course emotions play a role there. In other words, they play a role where the issue at hand is an emotional issue. So,
but I would go back to what Lundy said. The reason that I love my wife is based on outside experience and what she's shown me in the past.
Exactly. Of course. And well, let me say something
so it's
about
rational.
Oh, sure.
Yeah. What about final thoughts before we continue?
Sorry.
Yeah, go ahead. Do closing statements, and then we can argue.
Right. Well, I wanted to say something about. Can I say mine, or does someone else want to go?
Yeah, you can say yours.
I'll try to be real quick. As far as I'll work my way backwards. As far as the use or the emotional thing goes, I think in every sense of the word, emotions are physical. I mean, even the distinction BigLundi tried to make, which was, I guess, between like the experience and the kind of ontological cause of that experience, the physical cause, whereas the effect is somehow not physical, but in every sense of the word, the emotion is something I actually feel. I mean, what's more physical than a feeling? Touching the wall is a type of feeling, so I experience it just as fully, if not more fully, than I experience any other physical thing, like touching a wall. So it's completely physical to me in that sense, and therefore, there's, again, no distinction between, science makes a physical usefulness, whereas religion makes an emotional usefulness, since they're both physical. But, and lastly, on this idea of usefulness, I really fear because it's not, it can't be used as an argument to its truth value. We are appealing to the issue is shifted to usefulness, in which I think there's a lot of perfectly valid uses that religion can offer, and so I think the I guess caution I would point out there is that we're also ushering in a lot of religious ideas under that kind of same banner of utility. So that's
all right, Prag, got something?
Now, I guess because we're all going off on the different points, the overall point is the number one cause of people choosing religion?
Something that does. I see this all on the same topic, and I'll explain when I get to mine, but you go do yours.
No, I can give some attempt. I can see religion definitely being an emotion-based decision. If you have a crisis in your life and you're looking for some anchor to latch yourself onto, religion can definitely be that. It can be that false hope. Religion is, since we are on the topic of emotion, it can be health beneficial. If you have more stability towards the fear of death, and you suddenly get rid of that fear, that can promote behavior. I mean, emotions can cause depression. If you have a negative emotion, that can prevent that depression. It prevents stress. It can prevent, or it can cause clearer thinking when you're more positive. As I guess I'll just push enter. Positive emotion promotes clearer thinking, higher energy levels, greater alertness, etc. That kind of stuff. These are all benefits from religion that people naturally sort of gravitate towards. Any sort of hope. So it doesn't even necessarily have to be religion, but it is a type. Religion has helped form communities. So if you want to be part of a community, sometimes you'll join that religion to be part of it. So that's something to keep in mind. It is useful, as Witt's implying. It is. But obviously people can abuse religion. You can abuse anything, but it's still, like anything, it can be considered power. I'll just close with that.
Sounds good. I guess I'll do mine now, and if anyone else wants to come in after me, they're more than welcome to. But I see it as this. Everyone has very good points apart. People can abuse religion and use religion to make a whole bunch of money, and I won't forget you too, Chadwick. They can abuse religion to make money. They can use religion to provide them a security blanket from the fear of death. They could also use religion as far as their total lack of understanding of actual facts out there. Now, as far as if those actual facts are valid and with the form of solipsism, that's when it gets into a little bit more of the nitty-gritty, which I'm sure we will get back to when we come back to this topic within the next 2 weeks. And so if we're looking at everything like that, I think we've discussed pretty vaguely, the many reasons of why someone would actually be religious and the inner workings of that reason. And I think it was a absolutely great topic to have, and I appreciate everyone here. So if Chadwick, you want to say something, be my guest.
Well, religions are all crap. Peace out. No. I'm kidding. Anyway, yeah, I mean, if you get down to the very minorly religious people, those who accept whatever is scientifically proven, the Big Bang Theory, evolution, and what they believe is that all these processes happen, but God just guided them, or just set it in the motion. So there really is. He really doesn't seem to serve much of a purpose, and so I think it's something that's completely improvable. It's something that, but they're unwilling to get rid of the to get rid of the comfort that they still have by believing that a God exists, and or even more, and that their life that they could have a chance at some. It's also something else that hasn't been covered today is their fear of their own mortality. And they believe that if God exists, that somehow they're going to be immortalized by going into another life that's going to be free of whatever pain and irritation that they suffered through in this life.
Sounds good. Strife, if you want to say something.
From what I've gathered, it seems like to me the conclusion could be that religion is purely emotional arguments, and it's not based on anything solid, besides, well, possibly experience, which is subjective via person to person.